You probably stink even at home, don't you? The wealthy woman said, pinching her nose as if the man standing in front of her were a pile of rotting garbage. She laughed, laughed loudly, laughed while looking around, as if she'd just delivered the most natural punchline in the world. And the sanitation worker, still holding his push broom, just stood there as heat crawled up his neck. People on the sidewalk stopped. Some looked away out of embarrassment. Others out of fear of being associated with the man in the bright safety orange uniform. But none of them dared say a word in his defense. He tried to ignore it, tried to breathe, tried to stay professional. But the woman wasn't done. My God, do you people not own mirrors? Look at that uniform. Look at your hands. You work in trash and probably sleep in it too. He didn't answer. If he answered, he could lose his job. And losing anything wasn't an option. He'd already lost too much. The woman took another step toward him, close enough that it felt like she was sniffing his soul. Honestly, people like you should be using the service entrance, not the front side of my street. The words hung in the air. Heavy, sharp, cruel. And right then, right in that second, he felt his heartbeat change. Not anger, something worse. A deep, quiet ache only people who've been humiliated their whole lives know. His name was James Carter, 52 years old, sanitation worker for almost 2 decades. A soft-spoken man with a tired back, weathered hands, and a kindness nobody saw because nobody ever truly looked at him. But before all of this, before the gloves and the broom, before he became invisible, James had dreams, and he had a daughter who used to say, "Dad, one day I'll make you proud." He just didn't know that the threads of his life and the life of the woman who now mocked him were about to twist together in a way he never could have imagined. Her name was Lauren Vance, 49, a well-known socialite in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods just outside Boston. Always in heels, always polished, always above everyone, at least in her own mind. She was furious because James, while sweeping the sidewalk, had brushed a tiny bit of dust toward her pristine white shoes. Just that, and she unleashed hatred as if it were a moral duty. Do you even pay attention? Look what you did to my shoe. This is Italian leather, worth more than your entire paycheck. James swallowed hard. I'm sorry, ma'am. It wasn't intentional. It never is. People like you never intend anything. You just exist and get in the way. It's remarkable. He lowered his head even further. And in that tiny moment of silence, Lauren felt pleasure. Yes, pleasure. Pleasure in shrinking someone she deemed beneath her. But she had no idea that later that same morning, something would happen, something she couldn't predict, something that would flip her entire world. The humiliation didn't stop there. When James tried to walk away, still trembling, Lauren let out a final cruel laugh. Go on, get out of here. Just looking at you makes me smell the landfill. A few neighbors chuckled with her, lacking the courage to disapprove. James walked slowly, broom in hand, as if gravity itself were heavier around him. Each step echoed with memories of every insult he'd ever heard. Dirty, trash man. Old, worthless nobody. A poor man who should be grateful to clean up after us. He was used to it but never numb to it. Some wounds are built to always sting. His pocket buzzed. It was his old phone. A message. He read it, and his heart jumped for a completely different reason. It was from his daughter, his pride, his hope, the one person who made him feel human. Dad, today's the day. I got the interview. Wish me luck. He smiled, small, shy, but genuine. A smile that Lauren would have hated to witness. You'll do great, sweetheart. I'm praying for you. I believe in you. Warmth flickered in his chest like a fragile flame. But what he didn't know, what nobody could have guessed, was that his daughter's future was directly tied to the same woman who had humiliated him that morning, in a way no one could have predicted. A coincidence too bizarre to be random. A coincidence that would set off everything that came next. Minutes later, finishing his route, he saw something on the sidewalk near Lauren's home. Something small, something shiny, a pendant, gold, delicate, a small sapphire at its center. He picked it up, looked around. No one in sight. Probably expensive, probably important. But James didn't think about keeping it. He was poor, but he wasn't a thief. Never had been. Never would be. He bent down to slip it into his pocket, so he could return it later. But a voice exploded behind him. You. He froze. Lauren was marching toward him, her steps sharp, her face twisted in anger, her eyes narrowed like blades. What are you doing with him, wine necklace? His fingers unclenched automatically. I found it on the sidewalk. I was going to return it, ma'am. Oh, sure, she snapped. Of course you were. She snatched it from his hand with an aggressive jerk. Imagine that. A garbage man stealing. What a shock. I didn't. He couldn't finish the sentence. I'm sure you were just waiting for me to go back inside, so you could run off with it. No, ma'am. I swear I. Save it, she barked. People like you always say that. The neighbors lingering around all stared, judging, assuming, condemning. Lauren leaned closer, delivering the blow she knew would crush him. If I wanted, I could call the police right now. You know what would happen? Silence. She smirked. They believe me, not you. A sharp, painful, terrifying truth. James felt something inside him fold. Collapse. A tear escaped. Quiet, unnoticed, or maybe just ignored. Lauren didn't care. Next time, keep your hands off things that don't belong to you. She spun around, stormed through her gate, and slammed it shut. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that the pendant, that tiny piece of gold and sapphire, held a secret. A secret that wasn't hers. A secret that shouldn't have been on that sidewalk. A secret that, once revealed, would tear open her life from the inside out. And the man she despised, the man she humiliated, would become the only person capable of saving her future or destroying it. The humiliation that morning was only the beginning. Fate was already shifting, and neither of them could stop what was about to come. James finished sweeping the last block of his morning route, but his mind wasn't on the street anymore. The humiliation clung to him like a stain he couldn't wash off. Lauren Vance's voice echoed in his head. They believe me, not you. It didn't matter that he'd done nothing wrong. It didn't matter that he'd only tried to return something she dropped. To her, and to everyone watching, he was guilty before he even opened his mouth. He'd lived his whole life knowing some people saw him that way. But today felt different. Today felt like someone had pressed a boot against his chest and left it there. He stopped near the corner of Millridge Lane, leaned on his broom, and closed his eyes for a moment. Then his phone vibrated again. A call from his daughter. He answered immediately. Hey, sweetheart. Dad. Her voice was bright, too bright. I'm at the building now. It's huge. Like really huge. Can you hear the traffic? I can hear you just fine, he said softly. You nervous? A little, she admitted. But I'm trying to act like I belong here. You do belong, he said. More than you know. A small silence came through the line. Not heavy, just full of emotion. I'll call you when I'm done. Okay? I'll be waiting, James said. And praying. She laughed. Love you, Dad. I love you too. The call ended. James held the phone for a second longer. His daughter, Amelia, 22, brilliant, hard-working, determined. Everything he wasn't allowed to be at her age. She was interviewing for an administrative assistant position at Vance Financial Group. Yes, that Vance. Lauren's family company. And none of them knew. Not Lauren. Not Amelia. Not even James until this morning. When Amelia told him she had an interview at a big financial firm near Weston, he had smiled, congratulated her, and prayed silently. He didn't realize until later that the address she sent him belonged to the building Lauren's husband owned. If Lauren knew her daughter was there, he shook the thought away. Lauren wouldn't connect the dots. She didn't care enough about him to even remember his name, right? Amelia stepped out of the elevator on the 17th floor of Vance Financial Group. Bright white floors, glass walls, city skyline stretching out behind modern desks. Her heart pounded. She'd never been in a place like this. She approached the reception desk. Hi, she said politely. I'm here for an interview with HR. My name is Amelia Carter. The receptionist, blonde ponytail, sharp navy suit, the type who could smell insecurity from 50 feet away, looked her up and down. You're here for an interview? She repeated, as if the idea shocked her. Yes, Amelia said with a hopeful smile. The receptionist didn't smile back. Instead, she picked up a phone. Hi, Susan. You have a candidate here. Yes. MHM. I'll send her in. She hung up and pointed toward a hallway. HR is straight down, last door. Thank you, Amelia said. But as she turned away, she heard a whisper. She's not going to last 2 minutes. Followed by soft laughter. James didn't know any of this. He was sweeping outside a row of townhouses when he noticed an older man sitting on the steps, staring at the same pendant Lauren had snatched out of James's hands hours earlier. James froze. The man seemed distressed, muttering to himself as he rotated the pendant between trembling fingers. That's hers, it's hers. Why was it outside? How did it get there? It took James a moment to recognize him. Richard Vance, Lauren's husband, founder of Vance Financial Group, a name on magazines, a face on billboards, a billionaire. But here, on this porch, he looked like a man falling apart. James took one careful step forward. Sir, are you okay? Richard lifted his head sharply. His eyes were bloodshot. Haunted. You, he said. You're the sanitation worker from this morning. James hesitated. Yes, sir. Richard held up the sapphire pendant. Did you see this earlier? Around here? James swallowed. Yes, sir. It was on the sidewalk. I picked it up to return it, but your wife. My wife said you stole it. Richard finished bitterly. James stayed silent. Richard studied him for a moment, really studied him. Then, unexpectedly, I don't think you stole anything. James blinked. Richard continued, voice low and unsteady. This pendant, it isn't Lauren's. A cold breeze swept down the street. James frowned, but he didn't interrupt. This belongs to my daughter, Richard said. His voice cracked. My daughter who passed away 3 years ago. The world went still. James felt a chill crawl over his skin. I had it locked away, Richard whispered. In a safe. A safe only I and Lauren can open. He closed his fist around the pendant. So, tell me, how did it end up on the sidewalk? James' breath caught. The implications were enormous. Dangerous. But before he could say anything, Richard continued. Someone opened that safe. His voice was breaking. And it wasn't me. Meanwhile, on the 17th floor, Amelia sat in a small conference room, clutching her folder. The HR manager entered, middle-aged, polite, formal. Amelia Carter? Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too, she replied, smiling warmly. The interview began smoothly. Questions about her experience, her work ethic, her goals. Amelia answered with confidence. She prepared for weeks. Then the manager flipped to another page of her notes. Now, just one more thing, she said carefully. You listed your emergency contact as James Carter. Yes, that's my dad. What does he do for a living? The manager asked lightly. He's a sanitation worker, Amelia said. For the city. The manager froze for half a second. An expression flashed across her face. Quick, sharp, judgmental. Oh, she said. Just oh. The interview shifted. Questions became shorter. Eye contact disappeared. Her tone turned cold. And then, well, Amelia, thank you for coming in. We'll be in touch. It wasn't even 20 minutes. She'd practiced for this for months. Amelia gathered her papers, stood up, and forced a smile. Thank you for your time. She left the room feeling like she'd swallowed a stone. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that Lauren had just stepped off the elevator on the same floor. And Amelia was walking straight toward her. Back outside, Richard was shaking. I don't know what's happening in my own house anymore, he whispered. Lauren has been hiding things, doing things that don't make sense. James listened quietly. I shouldn't be telling you this, Richard said, rubbing his forehead, but you seem like the only sane person I've spoken to in months. James didn't know how to respond. Richard suddenly stood. Listen, if my wife accused you of stealing, that's because she was hiding something. That pendant didn't fall. It was placed there. James' chest tightened. But why would she blame me? He asked. Richard stared at him with tired, hollow eyes. Because she needed someone people wouldn't believe. A familiar pain tore through James's chest. The same pain Lauren had caused that morning. Richard stepped closer. If something happens, if anything else shows up where it shouldn't, come to me. Not her. James nodded slowly. But inside, a storm was forming. At that same moment, on the 17th floor, Amelia rounded a corner and bumped straight into Lauren. The collision was small, barely more than a brush. But Lauren reacted as if she'd been shoved into traffic. Watch where you're walking, she snapped. I, I'm sorry, ma'am, Amelia said quickly. But Lauren's eyes narrowed. She stared at Amelia's face. Her hair, her clothes, her skin. Then, with disgust, who let you come in through the main entrance? Amelia blinked, confused. I had an interview. At what? Lauren laughed. Here? You. The cruelty landed like a slap. Amelia swallowed. I worked really hard to. Hard. Lauren cut in. Hard doing what? Filing trash cans? Mopping floors. Something shattered quietly inside Amelia. But Lauren wasn't done. What's your name again? Amelia, she whispered. Amelia what? Carter. Lauren froze. Carter. Her eyes widened just enough. Carter, she repeated slowly. Do you happen to be related to that sanitation worker outside my house this morning? Amelia felt her stomach drop. Yes, she said softly. He's my father. Lauren gave a cold, triumphant smile. Well, that explains everything. And then she delivered the final blow. You won't be working here. Ever. Amelia's heart cracked. But the real shock, the one no one expected, was still coming. Because as Lauren turned to walk away, Richard Vance stepped out of the elevator and saw everything. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Richard Vance stepped out just in time to hear the last poisonous words spill from his wife's mouth. You won't be working here. Ever. He froze. Lauren didn't see him. Amelia didn't see him. They were both too locked in the moment, one in cruelty, the other in quiet heartbreak. But Richard saw everything. The trembling in Amelia's hands, the satisfaction in Lauren's smirk, and the similarity, subtle, unmistakable, between the girl standing there and the man he'd spoken earlier that morning. Carter. James Carter. The sanitation worker Lauren had accused of stealing the pendant. Richard's heart clenched, and then Lauren turned around. She found her husband staring at her. Her smile faltered. Richard, she said lightly, adjusting her necklace as if nothing unusual had happened. What are you doing here? But Richard didn't answer. His eyes were on Amelia. Gentle, concerned. Are you all right, miss? He asked. Lauren blinked, confused, and then horrified. Richard, why are you? Because, he said, still looking at Amelia, you look like someone just tried to destroy your confidence. Lauren's jaw twitched. Amelia, stunned, shook her head. I'm fine. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be in anyone's way. Don't apologize, Richard said softly. Please. It had been a long time since anyone heard him speak like that. With warmth. With intention. Lauren stepped forward quickly, trying to block Amelia from his line of sight. She bumped into me, Lauren said sharply. And she lied to get an interview. I'm handling it. But Richard just stared at her. Something was shifting behind his eyes. Something he'd been holding back for years. You're handling it? He repeated quietly. Yes, Lauren replied, her voice rising. She doesn't belong here, Richard. Look at her. She's... Enough, he said. The words sliced the air clean in half. Amelia took a step back, startled. Lauren froze. Richard turned to the HR manager, who had suddenly appeared in the doorway of the conference room, looking pale. Did you finish the interview? Richard asked her. The manager stammered. Well, sir, yes, but... And did you dismiss her fairly? Richard continued. His tone was calm, deadly calm. Sir, there were concerns about her qualifications. What concerns? Richard asked. She has a college degree, 2 internships, volunteered at a literacy program for 3 years. The manager froze, because she hadn't mentioned any of that. Not to Lauren, not to anyone. But Richard knew. He'd read Amelia's resume before he even came upstairs. Something about her name had nudged him. He didn't know why, but he'd followed the instinct. Lauren turned toward him, eyes wide. You looked at her resume? Richard's stare hardened. Yes, and I saw nothing that disqualified her. Unless, of course, someone made a biased decision. The HR manager swallowed. Lauren's voice cracked. Richard, stop this right now. You're embarrassing yourself. No, Lauren, he said quietly. I'm seeing clearly for the first time. Amelia didn't know what to do. She stood there, gripping her folder so tightly her knuckles turned white. Richard faced her gently. Miss Carter, he said, I'm very sorry for how you were treated today. This isn't how we do things here. Lauren scoffed. It certainly isn't how I do things. That's the problem, Richard snapped. His voice echoed down the hallway. Everyone fell silent. Downstairs, the receptionist leaned forward, trying to eavesdrop. Employees turned their heads. A few whispered to each other. Everyone knew the Van Cess were powerful. Everyone also knew they were volatile. But this, Lauren being publicly corrected, that had never happened. Richard, Lauren said through clenched teeth, can we talk in your office? No, he answered evenly. What I have to say needs to be said here. Amelia felt her heartbeat pound against her ribs. She had no idea what was happening, but every cell in her body wanted to run. I should go, she whispered. No, Richard said again. You deserve to be heard. Lauren turned to Amelia sharply. You don't deserve anything here. You're nobody. Amelia flinched. Richard's face turned to stone. Her father isn't nobody. Lauren's face drained of color. You spoke to him, she said. You talked to that man. That man, Richard said, was more honest with me in 10 minutes than you've been in 10 years. A gasp echoed from one of the nearby desks. Lauren stiffened, mortified. You're overreacting, she said. He tried to steal my pendant. No, Richard interrupted. His voice was suddenly ice. Our daughter's pendant. Lauren froze. Completely. Richard took a step closer to her. You told me the safe had never been opened. You swore you hadn't touched it in months. Lauren swallowed, but the sound was small and shaky. Richard, it's complicated. No, he said. It's simple. He held out the pendant. This was in the safe yesterday. Today it was outside on the sidewalk. And you accused a man who didn't deserve it, because you needed someone to blame. Amelia watched in stunned silence. Lauren's lips trembled. You don't understand, she said. Then help me understand, Richard said sharply. Why was our daughter's pendant outside the house? Why did you lie about it being yours? And why did you try to ruin this young woman's chance at a job? The hallway was silent. Every breath held. Lauren looked around, the staring eyes, the judgment, the fear. And she did what she always did when cornered. She attacked. He's manipulating you, she screamed. Can't you see? That trash man is playing you for sympathy. And she's probably trying to get money out of you. Stop, Richard said. His voice boomed. Lauren went silent immediately. The HR manager backed away. Amelia didn't move. Richard inhaled slowly, painfully. Then he looked at Amelia with genuine regret. You didn't deserve any of this, he said. Please accept my apology. And if you'll allow it, I'd like you to come back for a proper second interview. With me personally. Amelia's eyes widened. Sir, I don't want special treatment. It wouldn't be special treatment, Richard said. It would be a correction. Lauren spun around. You can't do that. I run the hiring committee. Richard stared at her coldly. You don't run anything from now on. A collective gasp filled the hallway. Lauren stepped back like she'd been slapped. You can't mean that. I do. He turned to the HR manager. Effective immediately, Lauren no longer oversees hiring decisions. The HR manager nodded quickly, relieved, even. Lauren's voice cracked. You're humiliating me. No, he said quietly. You humiliated yourself. Amelia realized suddenly that she was shaking. She hadn't spoken in minutes. Richard looked at her again. Miss Carter, would you like an escort downstairs? No, Amelia whispered. I think I should call my dad. Richard's eyes softened. Tell him I'm sorry too. She nodded slowly, processing everything. Then she walked toward the elevator, past the stairs, past the whispers, past the shock. Lauren stood frozen, her world cracking under her feet. And just before Amelia stepped inside the elevator, her phone rang. Her father. She answered with a trembling voice. Dad. But she didn't get to finish. Because behind her, Lauren suddenly screamed. Don't you dare walk away from me. Amelia turned, startled, and saw Lauren charging toward her. The elevator doors began to close. Lauren's hand shot out, and Richard grabbed her wrist midair. Don't, he said. Lauren's face twisted with rage. The elevator closed. Amelia sank against the wall, shaking. She had no idea what her father was about to tell her. And she had no idea how the truth behind the pendant would soon turn her entire life upside down. Amelia stepped out of the elevator and into the lobby, her phone shaking in her hand. Her father's name glowed on the screen. She swallowed hard and answered, "Dad." There was silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence that made her heart pound. "Amelia," her father finally said, his voice low and strained. "Where are you?" "At the company," she whispered. "Dad, something happened." "Mrs. Vance." "I know," he said quickly. "Richard called me." Amelia froze. "He what?" "He told me everything," James said. "About the pendant. About what happened upstairs. About her." Amelia walked toward a quiet corner of the lobby, away from the security desk and curious glances. Her chest tightened. "Dad, why do they have Mom's pendant?" Her father exhaled shakily. "I need to tell you something, sweetheart, but not over the phone." Amelia's stomach dropped. "Dad, please. Come home," he whispered. "Please." She closed her eyes, tears burning behind them. "I will. I'm heading to the bus now." "No," he said sharply. "I'll pick you up. Don't go anywhere near the street. Just stay inside." That frightened her. "Dad, what's going on?" But he didn't answer the question. "I'm on my way." Then the line went dead. Amelia lowered the phone, her heart thundering. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And whatever it was, Richard Vance seemed to sense it too, because when the elevator doors opened again, he stepped out with urgency written all over him. "Miss Carter," he called gently. Amelia stiffened. "Sir? Is everything okay?" Richard looked genuinely troubled. "I just got off the phone with your father." He sounded shaken. Amelia nodded. "He wouldn't tell me anything." Richard hesitated. "Would you like me to wait with you until he arrives?" She blinked, surprised. "That's not necessary." "It might be," he replied quietly. Something about his tone made her blood run cold. Richard glanced toward the revolving doors of the lobby. "Has he ever mentioned anything unusual about the pendant?" "No," she said. "Just that it belonged to my mother before she died." Richard nodded slowly. "Your mother, was she from around here?" "No," Amelia said. "She grew up a few states away." "Why?" Richard didn't answer immediately. He looked as though he was working through a memory he didn't want to reach. Before Amelia could press him, the building's front doors swung open violently. James Carter rushed inside, breathing hard, his uniform still on, his face flushed with worry. "Amelia!" She ran to him. He hugged her so tightly she felt the air leave her lungs. "Dad," she whispered, "you're scaring me." He pulled back, cupping her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have told you earlier." Richard stepped forward carefully. "James," he said, "let's sit. You both need to breathe." James looked at him, not with anger, but with a strange mixture of dread and gratitude. "Yes," he said quietly, "we should talk." They took a seat in the far corner of the marble lobby, away from the crowd. James held the pendant in his palm, the small silver heart, the faded engraving, the symbol Amelia had seen her whole life. "Your mother," he began, voice trembling, "didn't lose this pendant." Amelia frowned. "What do you mean?" James swallowed. "She left it behind." Amelia blinked. "What?" Richard's eyes sharpened. James took a deep breath. "Your mother didn't die in an accident, Amelia. She disappeared. She left us when you were a baby." Amelia stared at him, stunned. "But you told me." "I lied," he whispered. "To protect you." Richard leaned forward. "James, this is important. Why did she leave the pendant?" James looked between them, tears gathering. "Because she wasn't supposed to take it." Amelia felt the ground tilt. "What does that mean?" James shut his eyes for a moment. "Your mother came from money, Amelia. A lot of money. Her family, her parents, they were connected to powerful people, wealthy people, people who don't like scandal." Richard inhaled sharply. "And when she met you?" Amelia said. James nodded. "She fell in love with someone they didn't approve of. A janitor. A man with nothing. Me." Richard closed his eyes, jaw clenching. Amelia's world spun. "So they what? Banished her?" James laughed bitterly. "They gave her an ultimatum." His voice cracked. "Leave you, or leave them." Amelia covered her mouth. "She chose us," James whispered. "She chose love. But they came looking. Her family sent people after us. After her. She ran. We hid. And then—" Richard asked softly. "One night she was gone." James's voice shattered. No note. No warning. Just the pendant left on the kitchen table. Amelia trembled. She wouldn't just leave me. I know, James whispered. That's why I think something happened to her. Something her family never wanted us to know. Richard looked at the pendant, his eyes darkening. James, what was your wife's maiden name? James hesitated. Then he said it, and Richard froze. Amelia noticed the change immediately. Mr. Vance? She whispered. Do you recognize it? Richard swallowed hard. Yes, he said quietly. I do. Amelia's breath caught. How? Why? Richard sat back, numb. Because that family owns 20% of this company. Silence fell like a hammer. Amelia stared at him. You're saying the family my mother ran from is connected to you? Richard nodded slowly. And if the pendant was outside your house, he murmured, dread coiling in his chest. James looked up sharply. You think they found her? Richard didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he wasn't ready to say it. Before anyone could speak again, the glass doors of the building swung open. Two people walked inside, a man in a charcoal suit, a woman in a navy coat. Both poised, both cold, both carrying the same eyes as the woman on Amelia's keychain, the only photo she had of her daughter. They spotted Amelia instantly. Their gazes locked onto her with alarming precision. James stood up immediately, stepping in front of her. Richard rose too. The suited man smiled politely, the kind of smile that meant danger. Amelia Carter? He asked. She didn't answer. The woman beside him clasped her hands. We've been looking for you. James stepped forward, voice shaking with fury. Stay away from my daughter. The man's smile widened. Oh, he said softly. We're not here for her. His eyes drifted to the pendant in James's hand. We're here for what belongs to our family. Amelia froze. James tightened his grip around the pendant. It doesn't belong to you, he hissed. The woman stepped closer, her expression soft, too soft to be real. It does. And so does someone else. Amelia felt her chest close. What do you mean? The woman's eyes flickered. Your mother, dear. Amelia's heart stopped. She's alive. The woman smiled faintly. For now. Amelia staggered back. James looked like he might faint. Richard stepped forward, eyes blazing. What do you want with her? The man glanced at Richard with amusement. Richard Vance, he said calmly. Always inserting yourself into matters that don't concern you. Richard tensed. You're wrong, he snapped. This concerns my company and my employees. The man smirked. Oh, Richard, if only you knew how deep your involvement already goes. Amelia felt sick. Where's my mother? The woman reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. She held it out to Amelia. Everything you need to know, she said softly, is inside. Amelia didn't reach for it. She couldn't. Her hands were shaking too badly. Take it, the woman insisted. Richard stepped between them. No, he said. She doesn't take anything from strangers. The man chuckled. Oh, she's not a stranger. She's blood. Amelia's throat tightened. The woman tilted her head. Read it, then decide if you want to come with us willingly. James stepped forward, horrified. She's not going anywhere with you. The woman gave him a pitying smile. James, sweetheart, she may not have a choice. And then she let go of the envelope. Let it fall to the floor at Amelia's feet. Both strangers turned and walked out of the building without another word. Amelia stared at the envelope lying on the marble. The lobby was silent. Richard looked at her. James looked at her. And Amelia slowly bent down, reached for the envelope, and felt the world begin to crumble. Inside was a photograph. Her mother, alive, but not free. Her mother was sitting in a hospital-like room, eyes tired, expression empty. And around her neck, Amelia froze. The pendant, her pendant, the real one, the one her father said had been left behind, the one that proved the worst fear of all. Her mother hadn't run. She'd been taken, and the people who took her had just found Amelia. Amelia stared at the photo, so long her vision blurred. Her mother was alive. Alive and trapped somewhere. James sank into a lobby chair as if his legs had given out. He covered his mouth with both hands, shaking silently. Richard stood rigid, eyes narrowed, calculating, his mind racing through possibilities, connections, threats. But Amelia, she couldn't breathe. She couldn't even blink. Her mother's face was older, thinner, drained of light, but unmistakable. Dad, she whispered. James looked up, his eyes red. She's alive, Amelia said, voice cracking. Dad, she's alive. James reached out, pulling her into his arms. I prayed, he whispered into her hair. I prayed every night that she was. But I never wanted it to be like this. Richard lifted the envelope from Amelia's trembling hands and examined it carefully. No address, no stamp, just a symbol embossed lightly inside the flap. A crest that made his blood run cold. James, Richard said softly, your wife, did she ever mention the Hollingsworth family? James froze. Amelia pulled away from him slowly, wiping her tears. Hollingsworth, she repeated. Who are they? Richard exhaled through his nose. They're old money, old power, one of the wealthiest families in the Northeast. They've controlled industries, councils, charities, and other things. Other things, Amelia whispered. Richard hesitated. They're a family that gets what it wants. James leaned forward. My wife never told me her parents' last name. She just said they were dangerous. Richard nodded slowly. That fits. Amelia felt a cold pressure building in her chest. Why would they keep her, she asked. For what? James squeezed her hand. Because she chose me, he said softly. And they never forgave her. Richard shook his head. No, he said. It's deeper than that. They both turned to him. Richard took a seat, the weight of memory on his shoulders. When I was young, early 20s, I interned for a private investment group. Very exclusive, very secretive. The Hollingsworths funded it. They were paranoid about protecting lineage, about loyalty, about obedience. Anyone who threatened the family's image or decisions disappeared. Quietly, Amelia felt her stomach drop. You think they took my mother because of image? Richard looked directly into her eyes. I think they never intended to let her go. The lobby suddenly felt too small, too bright, too exposed. Amelia hugged herself, trying to steady her breathing. James looked up at Richard. Why send the photo now? He asked. After all these years? Richard didn't blink. Because Amelia is an adult now, and they want something from her. A chill ran down her spine. From me? She whispered. Richard nodded. All of this, Mrs. Vance mocking you, the pendant showing up, the strangers arriving. It's not coincidence. They wanted you to know. They're setting the stage for something. James's voice broke. What do we do? Richard stood. First, we get you both out of here. He wasn't asking. He was commanding. He guided Amelia and James toward the private elevator behind the security desk, using his badge to unlock it. Where are we going? Amelia whispered. My office, Richard said. Safer there. Cameras. Locked doors. No one gets in without clearance. As the elevator ascended, the tension suffocated the small metal space. Amelia leaned against the wall, staring at the floor, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. When the doors opened, Richard ushered them quickly into his corner office. Glass walls, oak desk, a sweeping view of Manhattan. James sat heavily on a leather chair, still gripping the pendant like a lifeline. Amelia looked around, trying to anchor herself to anything solid. Richard closed the blinds and locked the door. Then he turned to her. What did they say to you exactly? Amelia swallowed. They said the pendant was theirs. That my mother belongs to them. Richard's jaw tightened. That confirms it. Confirms what? She breathed. Richard paced once, then stopped in front of her. Amelia, the Hollingsworth family doesn't act unless there's leverage involved. They never show their hand unless they're certain they already own the game. James groaned softly, leaning forward. So they think they own my wife? My daughter? Richard didn't sugarcoat it. Yes. Amelia slowly sat down, knees shaking. What do they want me for? She asked again. Richard hesitated. They might want you to replace her. The room felt like it plunged 10 degrees colder. Replace her? She whispered. Richard nodded grimly. In their world, bloodlines aren't broken. They're repaired, restored, reclaimed. James slammed his fist on the armrest. No, I won't let them take her. They won't, Richard said sharply. I won't let them either. Amelia looked up at him, stunned. You'd help us. Richard met her eyes. Yes. Why? James demanded. Why would you get involved with people like them? Richard's expression darkened. Because I've seen what they do to people they target. And because My family was once connected to them, too. Amelia's eyes widened. You? Richard nodded, a shadow crossing his face. My mother was a Hollingsworth. Silence slammed through the office. What? James breathed. Half Hollingsworth, Richard corrected. My father was not someone they approved of. They disowned her when she married him. She left the family, changed her name, tried to build a normal life. Amelia felt chills climb her spine. What happened to her? Richard took a long breath. She died when I was 16, he said quietly. Car accident. But the way he said it, it didn't feel like he believed it. James leaned forward. You think they? Yes, Richard said. His voice was steel. Yes, I do. The room held its breath. Amelia suddenly understood something. Not with logic, but with instinct. Richard wasn't just helping. He wasn't being kind. He wasn't even being protective because she was an employee. He was fighting his own ghosts. James rubbed his forehead. What do we do now? Richard sat on the edge of his desk. We figure out where that photo was taken. He handed it back to Amelia. Any details you notice? Anything. Amelia's hands shook as she brought the picture closer. A bed, a window with bars, a wall painted pale green, a medical bracelet on her mother's wrist, a number printed on it. Wait, Amelia whispered, leaning closer. There's something here. A number on her wristband. Richard snatched a magnifying glass from his desk drawer. Let me see. He studied it. His expression went rigid. This number format, it's not a hospital code. Then what is it? James asked. Richard lowered the photo. It's a private facility code. James looked confused. Private facility? Richard nodded grimly. The Hollingsworths owned two of them. One in Connecticut, one in upstate New York. High security. Off the books. No public records. Amelia felt tears spill again. You're telling me my mother has been locked away all these years? In one of their buildings? Richard didn't look away. Yes. James stood so abruptly his chair scraped the floor. Then we're going there. Right now. No, Richard said immediately. That's exactly what they want. Amelia looked at him desperately. Then what are we supposed to do? Richard turned slowly toward her, his eyes sharp with a plan forming. First, you need to disappear for a while. Both of you. James shook his head violently. We're not hiding. You're not hiding, Richard corrected. You're buying time. Amelia hugged herself. Time for what? Richard walked to his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. Thick, heavy, marked private. He hesitated for a moment, then handed it to her. What's this? She asked. My mother's file, he said. Everything I've collected about the Hollingsworth family over 20 years. Connections. Facilities. People. Weaknesses. James inhaled sharply. You've been investigating them? Richard nodded once. They took everything from me. I spent my life preparing for the day they'd come for someone else. Amelia squeezed the folder, feeling its weight, literal and emotional. And now they came for me, she whispered. No, Richard said softly. They made the mistake of letting me see it. Amelia looked into his eyes. There was no fear there. Only fire. Only resolve. Only the kind of determination born from pain. A soft knock at the office door made all three of them jump. Richard stiffened. James moved protectively in front of Amelia. Richard approached the door slowly. Who is it? He asked. Sir, came the assistant's voice. There's something you should see. What is it? It's security footage. Richard opened the door crack. Show me. The assistant handed him a tablet with shaky hands. Sir, this was recorded 1 minute after the two visitors left the building. Richard pressed play. James and Amelia watched over his shoulder. A black car pulled up outside the building. A man stepped out. Tall, gray hair, sharp suit, eyes that held no warmth. Richard's blood turned to ice. That's him, he whispered. Who? Amelia breathed. Richard slowly turned to her. My grandfather. Amelia felt her knees go weak. James staggered back. On the screen, the old man looked directly at the building's camera, as if he knew exactly where it was, and smiled. A slow, deliberate smile. Then he mouthed something. Richard rewound it. Zoomed in. For words. Clear as day. We're not done yet. Richard stood frozen, staring at the tablet, as if the screen itself were poisonous. Amelia didn't dare breathe. James steadied himself against the corner of Richard's desk, whispering, That man, that's him? The one behind all of this? Richard nodded once, a short, sharp motion. My grandfather, he said quietly. Victor Hollingsworth. The name seemed to darken the room. Amelia felt a wave of cold wash through her chest. He knew the camera was there, she whispered. He looked straight at it. He wasn't looking at the camera, Richard said, lowering the tablet. He was looking at me. James clenched his fists. And he said, you're not done yet. What does that mean? Richard turned toward the window, staring at the city below, as if searching for a threat within its skyline. It means, he said slowly, that this wasn't a warning. He turned back to them. It was an invitation. Amelia's nails dug into her palms. James stepped toward Richard. An invitation to what? Richard exhaled sharply, pacing the room. My grandfather doesn't approach anyone without leverage, without a reason. If he came here himself, that means he wants something he can't get through intimidation alone. He looked straight at Amelia. He wants you. She swallowed, every muscle in her body tightening. But why me? She whispered. What does he want from me? Richard hesitated. Your mother was the only daughter in her generation, he explained. The Hollingsworth family legacy was supposed to pass through her. Their fortune, their influence, their name. And she walked away, James said bitterly. Richard nodded, and it destroyed their plans. They needed another heir, another descendant. Amelia shook her head violently. No, I'm not part of their world. I don't want their name or their legacy. Richard stepped closer. That's the problem, he said. Your mother didn't want it either. Amelia stared at him. And look what they did to her. Silence fell. Heavy. Suffocating. James suddenly grabbed Amelia's hand. We're leaving, he said. Right now. We're not spending another minute in this building. Amelia nodded without even thinking. But Richard didn't move. You can't, he said quietly. James spun around. And why the hell not? Because they're watching, Richard replied. And if you run without a plan, they'll come after you. James stepped closer, anger and fear battling in his eyes. What do you suggest, Richard? That we just sit here like targets? Richard shook his head. No, I'm going to get you out. But if we leave now, we leave smart. We leave invisible. Ow, Amelia asked. Richard walked to the far corner of the office, pressed his palm against a wood panel, and click, a small hidden compartment slid open. Inside was a black case. James blinked. What's that? Richard lifted it from the wall. A clean identity kit, he said. I hoped I'd never have to use it. Amelia stared at him. You were planning to leave someday? Richard looked at the case as if it were a wound. I knew this day might come. Not like this, but close enough. James crossed his arms. So what's the plan? Richard opened the case. Inside were unregistered phones, 2 sets of car keys, cash, a burner laptop, 3 IDs with blank spaces for photos, and a folded map. He laid everything out on the table. Step 1, he said, you could disappear. Not forever. Just long enough for me to figure out where they're keeping your mother. Amelia's heart twisted. You're going after her? Richard looked at her, unwavering. Yes. James shook his head. You don't have to risk your life for us. Richard stepped closer. I do, he said, because they took from me too. Amelia felt something shift inside her. Fear, yes, but also an unexpected spark of trust. What about you? She whispered. What will you tell them when they come back? Richard's mouth tightened. I'll tell them nothing. A pause. Because they already know I'm against them. James frowned. And what happens when they come after you? Richard answered without hesitation. They already are. The lights in the office flickered. Only for a second, but long enough to stop every breath in the room. Richard's eyes shot to the ceiling. That's not normal, he said. Amelia backed up. Is that them? Richard moved fast. He grabbed the burner phones, the IDs, the cash, shoving them into James's hands. Both of you, get to the service exit downstairs. Use the east stairwell. No cameras. James blinked, panicking. Richard, what about you? I'm going to buy you time. Ow! Amelia asked, terrified. Richard looked at her with a calm she didn't understand. By giving them what they came for. Amelia stepped forward. No, they want me. Richard shook his head. They want control. And right now, I'm the bigger threat. The lights flickered again. Longer this time. Richard's face hardened. Go. He unlocked a second hidden door behind a bookshelf, a private stairwell reserved for executive security emergencies. James grabbed Amelia's hand, pulling her toward it. Just as they reached the threshold, ding! The elevator outside Richard's office opened. Soft footsteps echoed down the hallway. Slow, deliberate, confident. James froze. Amelia's breath vanished. Richard didn't move. He just looked toward the closed office door with the cold, resigned expression of a man facing a familiar nightmare. Then, a slow knock. 3 taps. Calm, measured, chilling. Richard whispered, "Go." But Amelia couldn't move. "Richard, go." His voice was steel. James pulled her, this time harder. The hidden door closed behind them, sealing them away. James turned his flashlight app on. The narrow staircase spiraled downward, dim and silent. Amelia whispered, "What if they hurt him?" James squeezed her hand. "He's doing what he thinks is right. We have to honor it." Amelia nodded, tears spilling. But her heart felt like it was splintering. Above them, faint through the walls, the sound of the office door opening. A man's voice. Cold, smooth, familiar from the video. "Hello, Richard." Victor Hollingsworth. Richard's answer was soft, but sharp as glass. "Grandfather." Amelia covered her mouth, shaking. James pulled her faster down the stairs. But she couldn't stop listening. Victor's voice carried, muffled but still unmistakable. "You've made a mess of things." Richard replied, steady. "No, you did that the day you took my mother from me." Victor's chuckle echoed through the vents. "Oh." Richard, always so emotional. "Just like her." Silence. Then, "Where's the girl?" Amelia's blood froze. She pressed her ear against the wall, trembling. Richard answered, "Gone." Victor hummed thoughtfully, "You cannot protect her." Richard's tone didn't break. "I can, and I will." A pause. Then Victor spoke words that made Amelia's heart stop cold. "She belongs to us." Richard's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "She belongs to no one." Silence. Then a dull thud, something hitting a desk. Or someone. James whispered, "Amelia, we have to go." But she couldn't move. Not until she heard. A sharp crash. Raised voices. A struggle. And then, a sound she never wanted to hear. Richard's pain gasped. Tears streamed down her face. "Dad, he's going to kill him." James held her tightly. "We can't help him if we get caught, too. Come on." He pulled her again. This time she let him. They descended the stairs quickly, every echo magnified by fear. At the bottom, they reached a metal door marked, "Service Exit. Authorized personnel only." James pushed it open. Cool night air hit their faces. A narrow alley behind the building stretched before them. A black SUV was parked at the far end. Keys in James's hand matched the car logo. They ran toward it. Amelia glanced back at the skyscraper, its gleaming windows suddenly monstrous. Somewhere inside, Richard was fighting for her, and she didn't know if he would survive. As James started the engine, Amelia whispered, "We have to get him back." James nodded. "We will." She looked at the photo of her mother again, tucked into her jacket. Her mother was alive. Richard was in danger. And Victor Hollingsworth had just declared war. Amelia wiped her tears and whispered, "Then we fight." James stepped on the gas. The SUV sped into the night. And far above them, in a tower of glass and power, Victor Hollingsworth watched from the window, smiling. Grace froze. Calvin had never spoken to her like that. Not even once. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried something far worse than anger. Clarity, the kind that cuts deeper than any shout. She opened her mouth, but the words tangled on her tongue. "You're really going to talk to me this way? After everything I've done for her?" Calvin slowly shook his head. "Grace, you didn't do things for me. You did them to me." The room went silent. Even the fancy grandfather clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. Grace felt a sting, something she hadn't felt in years. A hit to her pride, a bruise to her ego. And she hated it. "You think you're better than me now?" she snapped. "Just because you got a little promotion? Just because people suddenly pay attention to you?" Calvin didn't flinch. "No," he said softly. "I think I'm finally better to myself." Grace blinked. The sentence echoed in her head like a slap. He continued, "Every time I swept your driveway, You talked to me like I was dirt, and I let you. Every insult, every laugh, every time you pretended I didn't have a name. Her jaw tightened. I never. You did, he said. Every week. Grace's breath hitched, because deep down she knew it was true. Every mocking comment, every condescending smirk, every moment she reminded him he was just the trash man. And now he stood in her house, not as a worker, not as someone beneath her, but as the one person who could save her daughter. Something inside her twisted. Fear, not of losing her status, but of losing Emily. Grace swallowed hard. Calvin, I know I wasn't kind sometimes, but sometimes. He finally let out a short, tired laugh. Grace, I didn't come here to fight with you. This isn't about us. He pointed toward the hospital discharge papers. This is about your daughter, and whether she trusts you enough to come home. Grace's chest tightened. Emily had barely spoken to her in months. Calvin continued quietly. She won't talk to you, but she talks to me. Not because I'm better, but because I listened. Grace looked away, because that hurt. It hurt more than she expected. Another cliffhanger formed between them. Heavy, painful, impossible to ignore. And what did she tell you? Grace whispered. Calvin hesitated. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because the truth would crack Grace open like glass. He stepped closer, close enough that Grace could hear his steady breathing. She said, he began slowly, that you only see her when you're afraid of losing her. Grace's throat closed. A tear, not dramatic, not loud, slipped without permission down her cheek. And Calvin kept going because she needed to hear it. She said you care more about being right than being present. More about appearances than connection. More about winning than loving. Grace pressed a hand to her mouth. They weren't just words. They were her daughter's pain. Then Calvin added the one sentence that made her knees weaken. She said she doesn't feel like your daughter. She feels like your project. Grace collapsed into the nearest chair. For the first time in a long time, her voice had no sharp edge. No control. No armor. What do I do? She whispered. Calvin exhaled slowly, as if he'd been waiting for that question for years. You tell her the truth. Not the polite truth. Not the pretty truth. He leaned forward. The real truth. The one you've been running from. Grace wiped her face, her hand trembling. And what truth is that? She whispered. Calvin stepped back, letting the weight of the moment hang. That you've been so busy being important, you forgot how to be a mother. Grace closed her eyes. Those words shattered her, but she didn't deny them. For the first time in the entire story, Grace broke, not loudly, not theatrically, but honestly. Calvin waited, not rushing her, not saving her, just standing there, letting the truth settle. And then the smallest, quietest moment happened. Grace nodded, a simple nod, soft, vulnerable, foreign to her. You're right, she whispered. God, you're right. Calvin didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He didn't enjoy her fall. He simply said, good, because now we can fix it. Grace looked up. We, she repeated. Calvin hesitated, but nodded. If you're willing to listen, really listen, I'll help you talk to her. I'll help you understand her. I'll help you bring her home. Grace stood slowly, wiping tears from her chin. And then she said the most shocking sentence of the story so far. Calvin, I'm sorry. The air shifted. Not completely. Not magically. But enough. Enough to make the audience lean forward. Enough to hint that redemption might be possible. But before Calvin could respond, Grace's phone buzzed. She looked down, her face drained of color. Calvin tensed. What is it? Grace's voice cracked. It's the hospital. The cliffhanger hit like thunder. Grace's hand trembled as she stared at the caller ID. St. Thomas Medical Center. The same hospital where she'd spent the last 2 sleepless days pacing cold hallways, waiting for updates that never came fast enough. The same place where Emily had been admitted after collapsing from exhaustion and stress she never should have carried alone. Calvin watched her chest rise and fall too quickly. He'd seen fear before, real fear. But this kind? This was the fear of a mother terrified she might be too late. Answer it, Calvin said softly. Grace swallowed hard and pressed accept. Hello. Her voice cracked. Mrs. Walker? It was the nurse, gentle, calm, professional. Too calm. Yes, it's me, Grace breathed. There was a pause. a pause that felt like someone holding the world hostage. "We need you to come to the hospital as soon as possible." Grace's knees buckled so fast that Calvin lunged forward, catching her by the arms before she hit the floor. "What's wrong?" she choked out. "Please, what happened?" The nurse exhaled slowly on the other end. "Your daughter is stable, but she woke up from a panic episode asking for someone, and she refuses to talk to any of the staff until she sees them." Grace steadied herself against the wall. "Is she asking for me?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Another pause. Another knife. The nurse spoke carefully. "No, she's been asking for Calvin." Grace closed her eyes, and if humiliation had a temperature, she felt it burn through her skin. She forced herself to breathe, forced herself to stand, forced herself to speak. I understand. We're on our way." She hung up. Her hand dropped to her side like it had lost its purpose. For a moment, neither of them spoke, because there are silences that scream louder than words. Then Grace looked up at him, eyes wet but no longer wild, just defeated. "She wants you," she whispered. Calvin didn't smile. He didn't take pride in it. He didn't let ego twist the moment into something ugly. He simply nodded. "Let's go." The drive. Grace drove because she needed something to control. Calvin sat in the passenger seat, hands folded, watching the world blur by. The car smelled like perfume, expensive, sharp, a scent meant to be noticed. But beneath it, he sensed something else, the sour trace of fear. Grace gripped the steering wheel. "You were right," she murmured. "About everything." Calvin didn't respond. He wasn't going to make this moment about him. "I didn't see her," Grace whispered, voice breaking. "I didn't see her pain. I was so focused on making sure her life looked perfect that I didn't realize I was breaking it." Calvin turned his head slowly. "Grace, people don't become better by accident. They become better when they face the truth." She swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the road. "I'm trying," she said. "I'm trying now." Calvin nodded. "That's a start." But even as he said it, something unsettled curled inside him. A memory. Emily's voice, small, trembling, honest, when she confessed. "She doesn't see me, Calvin. She sees the version of me she wishes I were." And now, as Grace drove, he wondered, could that really change? Or was this only fear talking? Arrival. St. Thomas Medical Center's sliding doors opened with a whisper. The white lights felt too bright, the air too cold, the waiting room too silent. Grace walked ahead, heels clacking against the tile, a sharp, nervous rhythm. Calvin followed. The nurse at the front desk stood as soon as she recognized them. "Mrs. Walker." "Mr. Johnson." She led them down the corridor. As they walked, Calvin noticed Grace's hands shaking. Her nails, the perfect, polished kind, clicked softly as she tapped her fingers together. At Emily's door, the nurse paused. "She's conscious, but she's distressed. She's been calling for Calvin since she woke up." Grace inhaled sharply. Can I go in with him?" The nurse looked between them. "That's up to Emily." Grace nodded, biting her lip until it turned pale. Calvin placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Let me go in first. I'll talk to her. Then I'll ask if she wants to see you." Grace hesitated, then exhaled in a long, trembling sigh. "Okay." She stepped back. The nurse opened the door. Calvin walked into the room quietly. And there she was, Emily. Emily sat upright in the bed, knees pulled to her chest, hospital bracelet sliding down her wrist. Her hair, usually brushed smooth, fell in waves over her face. But her eyes lit up the moment she saw him. "Calvin!" Her voice cracked, but with relief, not pain. He crossed the room, pulling up a chair, trying not to look shocked by how frail she seemed. Her breathing was shallow, her cheeks pale, her hands twisting the blanket tightly. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I did," he said softly. "Are you okay?" She shook her head, eyes filling with tears. "It felt like everything was closing in on me, and I couldn't breathe, and they kept asking questions, and I just needed," she swallowed. "I needed someone who wouldn't judge me." Calvin felt something twist hard inside him. He reached out, placing a steady hand over hers. "I'm here, Emily." She nodded, tears tracking down her cheeks. Then she took a deep breath. "Is she here?" Her voice was small. "Your mother?" he asked gently. Emily's eyes lowered. Yes. She's outside, he said softly. Waiting. She wants to talk to you. Emily's body tensed. I can't, she whispered immediately. Not yet. Not like this. She'll try to fix me, or tell me everything I did wrong, or... Calvin squeezed her hand. No, he said firmly. Not this time. She looked up, confused. She's different right now, Calvin continued. Scared. Real. Vulnerable. She's willing to listen. She asked for my help. Emily blinked. She asked you for help? My mother. Yes. Emily looked stunned, then uncertain. What if she blames me? She whispered. What if she makes everything about her again? What if? Calvin placed a hand over her trembling one. Emily, look at me. She did. When she walked into that house earlier, she wasn't the woman who insulted me. She wasn't the woman who tried to control everything. She was just a mother terrified of losing her daughter. And when I told her the truth, she didn't yell. She didn't deny it. She broke. Emily's lips parted. She broke. He nodded. She said she was sorry. Emily covered her mouth with her hand as tears spilled again, these softer, different. But here's the real question, Calvin said gently. Do you want to talk to her? Not because she wants it, not because I think you should, but because you might need it. Emily stared at the blanket. Her fingers tugged at a loose thread. Then she whispered, I don't want to lose her either. Calvin nodded. Then let me bring her in. You won't have to talk right away. You can just listen, or cry, or say nothing. But let the moment happen. Emily wiped her eyes. Okay, she whispered. But stay here. Please. I will. Emily gave a tiny nod, the kind that carried more weight than words. Calvin stood, walked to the door, opened it. And Grace stood there, hands pressed together like she was praying for mercy. Calvin stepped aside. She wants to see you. Grace swallowed, so hard it hurt. Is she angry? It was the first time in her life she'd asked that with fear instead of defensiveness. She's hurt, Calvin said honestly. But she's willing. Grace nodded once, twice, like she was gathering courage from the air around her. She stepped inside. Calvin moved to the corner of the room, not leaving but not intruding. Grace stood at the foot of the bed, breathing unevenly. Emily looked up, eyes red. Their gazes met, and something silent passed between them. Years of misunderstandings, pressure, fear, pride, love buried beneath expectation. Grace opened her mouth, but no words came. For the first time in her life, Grace Walker didn't know what to say. Emily spoke first. Mom, she whispered, and Grace broke. Completely. Her hand flew up to her mouth. A sob escaped, raw and shaky. I'm so sorry, Grace choked out. Emily, I'm so sorry. Emily's lips trembled. Calvin watched, heart tight. Grace reached out a hand, but stopped herself, afraid. Can I? She whispered. Emily nodded slowly. Grace sat gently on the edge of the bed and wrapped her arms around her daughter. Not a perfect embrace, not a polished one, but a real one. Emily cried into her mother's shoulder. Grace cried into her daughter's hair. Calvin looked away, giving them the privacy of a moment that should have happened years ago. Then Emily whispered something so soft he'd barely heard it. Don't leave again, Mom. Grace held her tighter. I won't, she whispered. Not this time. Not ever again. For the first time, they understood each other. But the story? The story was just reaching its turning point. Because neither of them knew. The biggest revelation was still coming, and it would change everything. The room softened as the storm inside Emily and Grace quieted. Tears were still fresh on both of their cheeks, but the sharpness had faded. For the first time since entering, Calvin allowed himself to exhale. There was still tension, heavy enough to bend the air, but something had shifted. A bridge had formed, a fragile one, but real. Emily loosened her grip on her mother, wiping her face with the sleeve of her hospital gown. I don't want things to go back to the way they were, she whispered. Grace shook her head immediately. No, they won't. I swear to you. Emily searched her mother's eyes, looking for even a trace of the old Grace, the correcting, judging, perfecting woman who always spoke like she was polishing a magazine cover. But she wasn't there, just a mother holding the fear of losing her child in trembling hands. Calvin quietly stepped closer. You both did something big today, he said. But healing is long, and it starts with honesty. Emily nodded weakly. Grace did too, slower, heavier, as if each nod dug through layers she'd never touched before. But then a faint knock came at the door. Dr. Harris stepped in, clipboard in hand, face steady in the way doctors train themselves to be when delivering important news. A thin silver stethoscope hung from her neck, catching the harsh fluorescent lights. "How are you feeling, Emily?" the doctor asked gently. Emily managed a small, weary smile. "Better, I think." "That's good," Dr. Harris replied. "I'm glad to see you awake. And I'm glad your support system is here." Grace squeezed her daughter's hand. But when the doctor shifted her attention to Grace, something subtle changed in her expression. Not tension, not fear, something else, something cautious. "Mrs. Walker," the doctor said, "I think we should talk in private for a moment." Grace blinked, immediately defensive. "Why? What's wrong? Is something happening? Is she worse? What aren't you telling me?" Dr. Harris lifted a hand. "Nothing critical, but some additional tests came back. And after reviewing her medical history, I think there's information you need to understand." Emily's body tightened again. Calvin stepped forward. "If it's about Emily, I should stay." Grace looked torn. Dr. Harris, however, spoke calmly. "He can stay if Emily says so." Emily didn't even hesitate. "I want him here." So Calvin stayed. Grace's lips pressed together, but she nodded. Dr. Harris closed the door quietly behind her and flipped open the file. "There's something important in here," she began, "that answers many of the questions you've had about Emily's exhaustion, her mood swings, her panic episodes, and the reason today's collapse happened." Grace stiffened. "Please, just tell us." The doctor looked at Emily first, directly, almost gently. "Emily, has anyone ever talked to you about chronic stress disorders? Or burnout syndrome?" Emily shook her head slowly. "No, nobody ever mentioned anything like that." Dr. Harris nodded. Based on her labs, her blood pressure, hormonal imbalance, and cognitive fatigue indicators, Emily is experiencing severe clinical burnout. She's been under massive, prolonged emotional and psychological pressure. She looked at Grace, and her voice softened, but didn't lose firmness. Often this happens to high-achieving teens in homes with very high expectations. Grace's face drained of color. I didn't realize." Dr. Harris continued. "This isn't just stress. Emily's system has been overwhelmed for months, maybe longer. She's been running on fear, not energy." Emily closed her eyes, tears warming her lashes. "She never thought she was enough," the doctor added. "She's been trying to live up to pressure she couldn't handle anymore." Grace covered her mouth. Calvin felt the air thicken. But the doctor wasn't done. "And there's something else." Dr. Harris pulled out a second sheet, thicker, with notes written in blue ink. Emily filled out a psychological evaluation during her intake, she said, one that tests perception of home expectations. She read softly, "I'm afraid to fail. I'm afraid to disappoint. I'm afraid people won't love me if I stop performing." Grace's eyes shut tight. Emily whispered, "I didn't think anyone would read that." Dr. Harris offered a reassuring expression. "It's my job to read it, and to make sure you receive proper treatment." Then she continued reading. "I hide a lot of what I feel because I don't want my mom to think I'm weak. I pretend everything's fine, but I'm tired. I'm tired all the time." Grace sobbed quietly. Emily turned away. But the next line made the entire room still. "Sometimes I wish someone would just tell me I'm enough. Just once. Without comparing me to someone better." Grace collapsed into the chair beside the bed, hands shaking uncontrollably. "I didn't know. Oh, God, I didn't know." Emily stared at her mother, guilt and grief wrestling behind her eyes. Dr. Harris wasn't harsh, but she didn't sweeten the truth either. "Mrs. Walker, these patterns usually come from environments where success is everything. I'm not blaming you, but I need you to understand your role if you want her to heal." Grace nodded, dazed, like a spotlight had been aimed directly at her soul. Then Dr. Harris placed the file down, and her tone shifted, not stern, not clinical, but careful. "There's one more thing," she said. "Something bigger." Grace held her breath. Emily tensed. Calvin leaned in. Emily's tests show signs of long-term sleep deprivation and anxiety-induced adrenal fatigue. She paused. But that's not the source of everything. Grace's forehead creased. What do you mean? Dr. Harris tapped her pen lightly on the file. Emily, your charts indicate symptoms commonly found in individuals who have been carrying emotional burdens not belonging to them. Emily's eyebrows knitted. Grace blinked. Calvin leaned forward. What burden? He asked. Dr. Harris exhaled. Emily has been hiding a secret, she said softly. Something she's been carrying alone. Something she didn't tell anyone. Emily stiffened, visibly violently. Grace gasped. What? Emily, what is it? What secret? Emily's breathing quickened. Emily, Dr. Harris said gently, you wrote something on the emotional intake form. Something you didn't say out loud. Emily shook her head. I don't want to talk about it. Grace reached out, panicked. But sweetheart, if something is hurting you. Stop. Emily burst out. The entire room jumped. Emily's chest rose and fell rapidly. I don't want to say it, she whispered. Not yet. Dr. Harris nodded slowly. Then I'll say only what the form allows me to disclose medically. Emily squeezed her eyes shut. Grace gripped the bed rail, knuckles white. Calvin stared at the doctor, waiting. Dr. Harris spoke carefully. Emily reported carrying guilt from something she believes she caused. Something from years ago. Something she thinks her family doesn't know. Grace froze. Emily's breath broke. Calvin's eyebrows furrowed. What incident? He asked softly. Emily whispered, Please don't. Dr. Harris looked at Emily. Is it okay if I explain the general context? She asked gently. Emily hesitated, then nodded, a tiny, terrified nod. So the doctor turned to Grace. Emily blames herself for something that happened in your family when she was younger. Something she didn't cause, but interpreted as her fault. That guilt has shaped her entire emotional development. Grace blinked rapidly. What in our family? Her voice suddenly caught. Like a realization stabbed her. No, it can't be that. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead. Oh, Emily. Emily curled inward, shoulders shaking. Calvin leaned closer. What is it? He asked Grace. Grace's eyes filled with tears, the kind that came from memory, not the moment. It was the night her father left, she whispered. Emily sobbed. Calvin's chest tightened. Grace covered her mouth with both hands. She thinks she caused it. The doctor nodded solemnly. That is what she wrote. Grace collapsed forward, shaking. No, Emily, no. That wasn't your fault. That was never your fault. Emily cried harder. Dr. Harris stepped back, giving space. Calvin watched the scene, heartbreak unfolding quietly, painfully, truthfully. Then something dawned on him. Something sharp, something important, something missing. He looked at the doctor. Is there more on the form? He asked carefully. Dr. Harris hesitated. Yes, she said. One final note, she wrote. Grace looked up, eyes swollen. Tell us, she begged. Dr. Harris opened the file again. And read. I feel like Mom never told me the whole truth about why Dad left. And I think she's hiding something big. Grace's breath stopped. Emily stared at her mother, tears slowing, confusion rising. Calvin felt a sudden weight settle between them. Grace shook her head. Emily's eyes narrowed through the tears. Mom, what truth? Grace looked down and said nothing, which was the biggest answer of all. Emily's voice, quiet and cracked, filled the silence. Mom, what are you hiding? Grace's hands shook violently. She wasn't ready. But the truth? The truth was coming, and it was about to change everything. Grace's fingers tightened around the edge of Emily's bed, knuckles turning pale as bone. A tremor moved through her shoulders, not small, not subtle, the kind that came from a truth buried too deep for too long. Emily watched her mother with wide, trembling eyes. Mom, she whispered, what are you hiding? Calvin stayed still in the corner of the room. He knew this was the moment that would change the entire story, the axis around which every previous wound revolved. Dr. Harris closed the file gently. I'll step outside for a moment, she said quietly. But before she could even move, Emily shook her head. No, stay, she said. I want the truth, and I don't want anyone to pretend everything is okay again. Grace's breath quivered. The doctor nodded and remained. Grace lifted a hand to her face, wiping a tear she hadn't allowed the world to see in years. Her voice came out uneven, thin. "Emily, your father didn't leave because of you." Emily sniffed, her voice barely audible. "Then why? Why does it feel like it was my fault? Why did he walk out right after we fought? Why didn't you ever tell me the real reason?" Grace closed her eyes, because she had been waiting for this moment for years, and dreading it more than death. She opened her eyes slowly, meeting her daughter's gaze with a vulnerability she had never dared show. "Because," she whispered, "the real reason he left is me." Emily froze. Even Calvin's breath caught. Grace swallowed hard. Her voice broke like something inside her finally snapped. "It wasn't you, Emily. It was never you. He left because of me." Emily blinked, disbelief and shock twisting across her face. "What?" she whispered. That doesn't make sense." Grace lowered her gaze. "I made him leave." The room felt suddenly too small, too warm, too silent. Emily shook her head, tears spilling again. "You made him leave? But you always said—" "I lied," Grace whispered, voice trembling. "I lied because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want you to know the truth about me." Emily stared, stunned. Calvin leaned forward slightly, not intruding, but ready in case the moment shattered into something painful. Grace inhaled sharply, gathering a courage she never had used for before. "Your father and I," she paused, breath shaking. "We were falling apart long before you ever noticed. We argued when you were asleep. We disagreed on almost everything. But the final argument, the night he left, wasn't because of anything you said or did." Emily's eyes softened with hope and hurt tangled together. "What happened?" she whispered. Grace pressed fingers to her temple. "He confronted me," she said, "about my expectations, about how hard I pushed you, about how obsessed I was with perfection." Emily's mouth fell open. Grace continued, voice cracking. "He said you were a child, not a trophy. He said I was crushing you without realizing. And I yelled at him. I told him he didn't understand what it meant to give you a better life, a better future. And then I said something I regretted the second it left my mouth." Emily's heart pounded. "What did you say?" Grace hesitated, then forced the confession out like ripping open a wound. "I told him that if he wasn't going to support the life I wanted for you, he should just leave." Emily gasped softly. Calvin stared at Grace, stunned by the quiet brutality of her honesty. "He packed a bag," Grace whispered. "He thought I didn't mean it, but I did. Or, I thought I did. I thought I was protecting you. I was so convinced I was right that I didn't care what it cost." Her voice thinned to a whisper. "He walked out because I gave him no other choice." Emily covered her mouth. Calvin could practically feel the weight pressing down on her chest. Years of guilt shifting into something else. Something heavier in a different way. "So all these years," Emily whispered, "all these years I thought he left because of me. Because we argued. Because I said I hated how strict you were. Because I yelled at him." "You were 10, Grace cried. "A child. You had no blame in any of it." Emily's shoulders shook. "Then why didn't you tell me?" Grace's voice softened, full of regret. "Because I couldn't bear for you to know the truth, that I was the one who broke our family. I thought if I kept pushing, kept controlling, kept trying to make everything perfect, I could at least give you the success I thought would make up for losing your father." Emily stared at her mother, eyes flooding with a pain deeper than sadness. "So that's why," she whispered. "That's why you pushed me so hard. That's why everything had to be perfect. That's why you wouldn't let me make mistakes." Grace nodded, crying silently. "I didn't know how to fix what I ruined," she whispered. "So I tried to control everything else, including you." Emily looked devastated. "I wasn't trying to replace him," Grace said, voice cracking. "I was trying to make myself believe I hadn't destroyed everything." Emily choked on a sob. "Mom, I needed you. Not your guilt. Not your fear. You." Grace covered her mouth with her hands, sobbing into them. "I know," she cried. "I know. And I'm so sorry I didn't see it." Emily looked away, tears running freely. Then she whispered, "So all this time, I was breaking myself, trying not to disappoint you, when you were the one who disappointed me." Grace flinched like she'd been slapped, but she didn't defend herself. She didn't argue. She didn't explain it away. She just nodded slowly, painfully. You're right. Silence fell. Heavy, raw, but honest. Emily lowered her head into her hands. I'm so tired, Mom, she whispered. I've been tired for years. Grace reached out, slowly, timidly, like approaching something fragile she'd broken once before. Then let me help you now, she whispered. For real this time. Without pressure. Without expectations. Just as your mother. Emily didn't move for a long moment. Then she looked up. Her voice was small, but there was no anger in it now. Only exhaustion and a distant hope. What do we do? Grace exhaled shakily. We start over, she whispered. From truth. From honesty. From love. Emily stared at her, searching for sincerity. Grace didn't look away. Not this time. Calvin watched the two of them, a mother and daughter standing at the edge of a new beginning, raw and wounded and real. But he sensed something else. The truth had surfaced. But the consequences? The deeper layers? They hadn't even begun. Emily wiped her cheeks. Mom, is that everything? She asked. Is there anything else you didn't tell me? The question hung in the air. Grace froze. Her breath faltered. Her eyes flickered. Not with guilt this time, but with something else. Fear. Deep, old, personal fear. Emily saw it instantly. Mom. Grace swallowed. There is one more thing. Calvin straightened in his chair. Emily stiffened, fingers tightening on her blanket. What is it? Emily whispered. What else have you been hiding? Grace hesitated, long enough that Emily's heart rate monitor beeped faster. It's something I never thought I'd have to explain, Grace murmured. Something that didn't come from anger or pride. Something I hid to protect you. But I can't hide it anymore. Emily felt a cold tremor run through her chest. Mom, what is it? Grace looked up. Her lips parted. Her voice was barely air. Your father didn't leave the way you think he did. Emily's breath hitched. Calvin leaned forward. Dr. Harris watched with quiet intensity. What do you mean? Emily whispered. Grace's eyes filled again. He didn't leave on his own. Emily froze. Calvin's jaw tightened. What does that mean, Grace? He asked softly. Grace inhaled sharply, her whole body trembling. I asked him to leave. She shook her head. No, it's worse than that. She lifted her face, tears dripping on her hands. I forced him to. Emily's lips parted in shock. Grace continued before she could lose her nerve. He didn't walk out. I did something that left him no choice. Emily's pulse spiked. What did you do? Grace's voice cracked open. I told him, if he didn't leave, I'd take you and disappear. Emily gasped. Calvin's eyes widened. Grace covered her face. I threatened him, Emily. I trapped him. I pushed him out of your life. Emily stared, stunned into silence. Grace's next words came out broken. He didn't abandon you. She sobbed. I abandoned him for you. Emily shook her head, tears pouring. But why? Why would you do something like that? Grace lowered her hands, revealing a face soaked with regret. Because I thought I was saving you. Emily's voice was weak, trembling. As saving me from what? Grace whispered. From the truth I never had the courage to tell. She paused, then spoke the words that shattered the room. Emily, your father didn't leave us. He left me because he discovered something about our marriage, and I didn't want you to know. Emily's heartbeat screamed on the monitor. Calvin felt the air collapse inward. Emily stared at her mother in horror. Mom, what truth? Grace lifted her tear-stained face and whispered, the truth that I was unfaithful. Emily's world cracked. Calvin felt his spine go cold. Grace sobbed harder, and the cliffhanger slammed like thunder. The room felt too small for the truth pressing against its walls. Grace's fingers trembled against the edge of Emily's bed. Her throat worked, but no words came out. Only guilt, old and sharp, rising like smoke from years of silence. Emily's tear-swollen eyes locked on her mother's. Mom, what are you hiding? Calvin stood beside her, steady and protective, the quiet anchor in the storm. Dr. Harris waited, arms folded softly, giving Grace space but refusing to let her escape. Grace finally inhaled, a shallow, broken breath. It wasn't your fault, she whispered. It was never your fault. It was mine. Silence. Pure, stunned silence. Emily didn't blink. Calvin froze. Even the doctor's pen paused. Grace's voice cracked open. The night your father left, he wasn't leaving you. Her eyes filled again. He was leaving me. Emily's mouth parted. I don't understand. Grace wiped her face, but her voice hardened in self-loathing as the truth fought its way out. I push him away. I push him so hard, Emily. I was obsessed with perfection, with image, with control. I never forgave him for losing a promotion. I treated him like he was less, like he didn't try hard enough, like he was embarrassing me. Her voice quivered, and one night, he finally broke. Calvin's jaw tightened. Grace continued. He said he loved you more than anything, but he couldn't stay married to someone who made everyone feel small, someone who expected perfection from everyone but herself. Emily covered her mouth. Calvin felt the truth hit like a slow-moving wreck. And I told him, Grace whispered, shaking, I told him if he walked out that door, I'd make sure you never looked at him the same way again. Emily's hand dropped. Mom, no. Grace cried openly now. I was angry, proud, terrified of losing control. So I let you believe you did something wrong. I let your guilt grow. I let your shame shape you. And I told myself I was protecting you. Calvin closed his eyes. Emily's voice came out broken, but sharp. You let me hate myself for years. Grace collapsed to her knees beside the bed. I know, and I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm begging for a chance to fix what I broke. Emily turned her face away, tears slipping silently. I was just a kid, she whispered, a scared little girl, and you let me think Dad left because of me. I know. Grace pressed her forehead to the side of the bed. I know, Emily, and I am so sorry. Calvin stepped closer, placing a hand on the bed rail, his voice low. This secret, it's what's been eating her alive. Grace nodded, sobbing. Yes, and if I had told her earlier, maybe she wouldn't be lying in a hospital bed. Emily didn't speak, and that silence was punishment enough. A sudden knock broke the tension. The door opened, and Bianca, perfectly groomed, perfectly smug, perfectly poisonous, stepped inside, clutching a designer bag, heels clicking like an insult on tile. Oh, good, she said casually. She's awake. Maybe now we can figure out how this affects the charity event schedule. Calvin's head snapped toward her. Emily's face drained. Even Grace looked stunned. Bianca continued, unaware or uncaring of the tension vibrating in the room. I mean, yes, tragic, whatever. But Grace, darling, we can't postpone the donor brunch. You're the keynote speaker, and people don't like drama. She said, drama, while gesturing toward Emily's foreline. Emily's face fell. Calvin's fists clenched. Grace slowly rose from the floor, something shifting behind her eyes. Not grief, not guilt, not weakness. Something else. Strength. Real strength. Bianca, Grace said quietly. Not now. Oh, please, Bianca laughed. You've spoiled that girl enough. If she can cry herself into a hospital bed, she can cry herself out of it. We all go through things. Calvin stepped in front of Emily, voice tight. Get out. Bianca scoffed. Oh, the janitor thinks he makes the rules now. Grace inhaled sharply. Bianca kept going. What's next? You'll tell me this meltdown wasn't Emily's fault either? Please. Grace, don't indulge her. She's dramatic, sensitive, and frankly, Grace cut her off with a raised hand. That had never happened before. Bianca blinked. Grace? What are you? Grace's voice dropped low, steady, dangerous. You don't speak about my daughter like that. Not now. Not ever again. Bianca laughed nervously. Oh, come on. We've always joked. We didn't joke, Grace said coldly. You insulted. You belittled. You treated my daughter the same way I used to treat people. The same way I used to treat her father. And I let it happen. But that ends right now. Bianca's fake smile faltered. Grace, you're emotional. You're making a scene. No, Grace stepped forward, eyes sharp. I'm making a change. She pointed at the door. You're not welcome in my life anymore. Or in Emily's. Or in our home. Leave. Bianca's jaw dropped. Grace, think about your status. Calvin crossed his arms. Grace didn't break eye contact. Leave. Bianca's face twisted in indignation, but the room had shifted. The power was gone. The arrogance deflated. She tried to recover. You'll regret this. People don't turn on me. Calvin smiled, small, steady, unbothered. They will after I tell them what you said to a child fighting for her mental health. Bianca paled. Grace took Emily's hand. I choose my daughter, she said. Bianca swallowed hard, spun sharply, and stormed out. The door slammed behind her. Justice served. Not loud, not violent, but clean, humbling, poetic. Exactly the kind of downfall the audience loves. The room settled. Grace turned back to Emily, eyes trembling but clear. I can't undo the past, she whispered, but I will never let anyone hurt you again, including me. Emily looked at her for a long moment. Calvin stepped back, giving them space. Slowly, painfully, Emily reached out her hand. Grace took it with both of hers, crying quietly. I need help, Emily whispered. I can't do this alone. I'll be there every step, Grace said. And if you want therapy, family, or individual, I'll go. Emily nodded. And maybe someday, I want to talk to Dad. Grace's eyes softened with acceptance. I'll give you his number when you're ready. Emily breathed out, relieved. Calvin smiled, proud. Dr. Harris marked something in the chart, satisfied. For the first time, the room felt lighter. As night settled, Calvin walked Emily out to a small courtyard near the hospital. The air was cool, quiet, gentle. Emily leaned against the bench. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. For seeing me. For staying. Calvin looked at her, steady, warm, sincere. I wasn't going anywhere. Emily smiled through tired eyes. You know, you changed my mom today. Calvin shook his head. No, you did. She was just waiting for the moment she realized you were worth fighting for. Emily's smile deepened. And is this the part, she teased softly, where the story ends? Calvin chuckled. No, he said. This is where it begins. Emily's heart fluttered. Grace watched from the window above, quietly, proudly, finally seeing what truly mattered. And far away, in a small apartment on the east side, a man stared at his old phone, at a message he never thought he'd receive. Dad, can we talk? He exhaled, hope rising. Some stories don't end. They simply open the door for the next chapter. Fade out.